The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers hummed with nervous energy. Ambassador Kelthera of the Zephyrian Collective stood at the central podium, her blue tentacles trembling as she held the latest intelligence report. Around her, representatives from 47 different species waited in their floating seats, each one looking more worried than the last. Honored council members, Kelthera began, her voice echoing through the translation devices. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. The species from the planet designated Earth Prime has achieved faster than light travel. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Councillor Vexthor, a tall insectoid with compound eyes, clicked his mandibles nervously. The Death World? The one with the impossible gravity and toxic atmosphere? The very same, Kelthera confirmed. Our xenobiologists still cannot understand how any species survived on that nightmare planet. The gravity is 3 times what most of us consider safe. The atmosphere contains a corrosive gas they call oxygen. The surface is covered in vast bodies of liquid that would dissolve most of our people, and yet somehow they not only survived but thrived. Elder Zokes, the ancient tree-like being who served as the council's senior arbitrator, rustled his leaves thoughtfully. What do we know about their intentions? That's where things become complicated, Kelthera said, consulting her notes. We sent them the standard first contact package. Universal peace treaties, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. They responded with something they called memes and asked if we wanted to see pictures of their small mammals. Memes? Asked Physician Prime Veltar, genuinely confused. Is this some form of biological weapon? We're not sure. Our translation systems are having difficulty processing many of their communications. They seem to find everything amusing, even things that should terrify them. When we sent them footage of our most advanced warships, they responded with videos of their young making exploding sounds with their mouths. Before anyone could respond, an urgent alarm chimed through the chamber. Communication Officer Trelon, a crystalline being whose body pulsed with different colors when stressed, was now flashing bright red. Council members, Trelon announced. We're receiving an emergency transmission from the hegemony of Kethval. Fleet Commander Grathek is requesting immediate assistance. The chamber fell silent. The Kethval were known throughout the galaxy as the most ruthless military force in existence. They had conquered 12 star systems without a single defeat. Their soldiers were genetically engineered for warfare, standing 9 feet tall with natural armor plating and claws that could tear through steel. If they were calling for help, something had gone very wrong. Put the transmission through, Elder Zokes commanded. The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing Fleet Commander Grathek. The massive Kethval warrior, normally an imposing figure of pure intimidation, looked shaken. His usually pristine black armor was scorched and dented. One of his forearms hung limp at his side. Honored Council, Grathek began, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. I must report a most unusual situation. 3 weeks ago, my fleet arrived at the human homeworld to conduct standard subjugation protocols. We expected minimal resistance from a primitive species that had only recently achieved spaceflight. What happened? Kelthera asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. They laughed at us, Grathek said, his voice barely above a whisper, when we broadcasted our surrender demands. They responded by asking if we had tried turning it off and on again. We assumed this was some form of primitive negotiation tactic, so we repeated our demands with additional threats, and they sent us a video of one of their military leaders. An older human with gray fur on his face. He was sitting in what appeared to be a command center, drinking some form of heated liquid from a small container. He looked directly into the camera and said, "You picked the wrong species to threaten. We've been practicing warfare on each other for millennia. This is going to be fun." Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The word fun being associated with warfare was deeply disturbing to most civilized species. When we began our bombardment of their outer colonies, Grathek continued, they didn't evacuate. Instead, they sent up ships to meet us. But these weren't military vessels. They were civilian craft, retrofitted with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate our shields. Worse yet, the pilots were broadcasting what they called music over all frequencies. The sounds were unlike anything we had ever heard. Loud, aggressive, with something they called guitar solos that seemed designed to cause psychological damage. Physician Prime Veltar leaned forward. What kind of casualties did you sustain? In the first engagement? None, Grathek admitted. But that's not the disturbing part. The humans disabled our ships without destroying them. When we sent boarding parties to reclaim our vessels, we found them covered in colorful symbols and what appeared to be artistic representations of human anatomy. Our soldiers were confused. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever defaced our equipment with artwork. This gets worse, the fleet commander continued. During the second wave of attacks, they somehow convinced our pilots to join them for what they called space racing. 17 of my best fighter pilots are now participating in something called Interstellar Demolition Derby and sending me videos of themselves laughing while crashing ships into asteroids for sport. Elder Zokes rustled his leaves anxiously. What is your current status, Fleet Commander? We're not sure, Grathek said. They've invited my entire fleet to something called a barbecue on their moon. Half my soldiers want to attend. They keep sending us recipes and asking about our dietary requirements. Yesterday, they delivered care packages to our ships containing something called cookies and handwritten notes, thanking us for making first contact so interesting. The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Ambassador Kelthera struggled to process what she was hearing. Fleet Commander, are you saying that instead of conquering them, you're socializing with them? I honestly don't know what's happening anymore, Grathek replied. Every military strategy we've attempted, they've countered with something that makes no logical sense but somehow works. When we tried to blockade their planet, they turned it into a game and started keeping score. When we attempted psychological warfare, they responded by sending us videos of their small furry animals doing amusing things. Have you considered retreating? Counselor Vexthor suggested. We tried. They followed us and asked if we needed directions home. Then they gave us a gift basket for our journey and asked us to stay in touch. 3 of my ships have already added humans to their communication networks and are receiving daily updates about something called cat videos. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Ambassador Kelthera looked around at her fellow representatives, seeing her own confusion reflected in dozens of alien faces. So, Elder Zokes said slowly, it appears that humanity has somehow turned a military invasion into a social gathering. What do we do now? Asked Physician Prime Veltar. Kelthara consulted her notes again, though she was beginning to suspect that nothing in their vast database of galactic knowledge would help them understand these creatures from the death world called Earth. I suggest we open official diplomatic channels immediately, she said, and perhaps prepare for the possibility that everything we know about warfare is about to change. Outside the chamber, communication networks across the galaxy buzzed with a single question that would soon define a new era. What exactly were humans? And why did they seem to think that fighting was supposed to be enjoyable? 3 months had passed since the Kethval first encountered humanity, and the Galactic Council was receiving reports that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. In the medical wing of the Council headquarters, Physician Prime Veltar sat across from a very confused Kethval soldier named Bektar. Please, describe what you experienced again, Veltar said gently, his healing tendrils glowing soft blue to help calm his patient. Bektar, a massive warrior who stood 8 feet tall and could normally tear through solid metal, was curled up in the corner of his medical pod, trembling. They played music during the battle, he whispered. But it wasn't music like we know. It was loud and angry and made my bones hurt. They called it death metal, and they played it while they shot at us. Music as a weapon is not unknown in galactic warfare, Veltar noted, making careful observations on his medical tablet. Many species use sound frequencies to disorient enemies. No, you don't understand, Bektar said, his 4 eyes wide with confusion. They weren't trying to hurt us with the music. They were enjoying it. They were singing along while they fought. One of their pilots was playing something called an air guitar while dodging our plasma cannons. Veltar's tendrils dimmed with concern. In 300 years of treating soldiers, he had never encountered anything like this. What else did they do that troubles you? They painted themselves, Bektar continued, not with camouflage or war paint like civilized species. They painted their faces with the blood of fallen enemies and charged at us screaming what they called battle cries. Some of them were yelling things like, "For the Emperor," and "Witness me," and "Leroy Jenkins." We still don't know what any of that means. The physician made more notes. According to his research, humans were supposedly an intelligent species, yet their behavior suggested something far more primitive and terrifying. The worst part, Bektar said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper, is that they used their own wounded as bait. We found what appeared to be a badly injured human soldier calling for help in a damaged escape pod. When our rescue team approached, the wounded human jumped up, completely healthy, and detonated some kind of explosive device while laughing maniacally. The explosion didn't hurt anyone, but it covered our soldiers in a substance that made them glow bright pink for 3 days. Pink? Feltar asked, struggling to understand the tactical advantage of making enemy soldiers glow. That's what we wondered too. But then we realized that the pink powder contained tracking devices, and also, it smelled like flowers. Our soldiers couldn't stop sniffing themselves. It was very confusing. Before Veltar could ask more questions, his communication device chimed. The voice of Admiral Krexnoth, the Kethval's supreme military commander, filled the room. All medical personnel, we have more soldiers incoming. The humans have escalated their psychological warfare to levels we cannot comprehend. Minutes later, Veltar watched as transport ships unloaded dozens of Kethval soldiers, all of whom appeared physically unharmed but mentally shattered. One soldier kept repeating, "The trees speak Vietnamese," over and over. Another was trying to surrender to medical equipment, convinced that everything around him was secretly a human in disguise. The most disturbing case was a veteran warrior named Gorthek, who had served in 17 successful campaigns across the galaxy. He sat in his medical pod drawing pictures of small Earth creatures on the walls with his claws. "What are you drawing?" Feltar asked gently. "Puppies," Gorthek replied matter-of-factly. "The humans showed us puppies during the siege of Colony 7. They projected images of small furry creatures onto our ship hulls while they attacked. The creatures were playing and rolling around and making happy sounds. It was impossible to concentrate on military tactics while watching baby dogs discover snow for the first time. This was a distraction technique? We thought so too. But then they started broadcasting what they called educational content about animal care and responsibility. By the end of the battle, half my unit was asking for information about adopting Earth pets. Command had to issue new orders forbidding soldiers from making emotional attachments to enemy propaganda animals. Veltar's medical readings were showing something unprecedented. These soldiers weren't suffering from traditional combat trauma. Instead, they seemed to be experiencing what humans might call an existential crisis, questioning the very nature of warfare itself. "There's more," Gorthek continued. "They've somehow convinced 3 entire Kethval battalions that death isn't permanent for humans. They stage these elaborate ceremonies where supposedly dead humans come back to life and continue fighting. We've analyzed the footage extensively and we still can't figure out how they're doing it." "Resurrection technology?" Veltar suggested. "That's what we thought. But the humans keep insisting it's something called method acting and movie magic. They've offered to teach us their special effects techniques in exchange for us attending something called film school." The physician was beginning to understand why the Galactic Council was so concerned. Humans weren't just winning battles. They were fundamentally changing what warfare meant. Instead of defeating enemies, they were confusing them into friendship. His thoughts were interrupted by an emergency broadcast from the front lines. On the main screen, Admiral Krexnoth appeared, looking more bewildered than any military leader should ever look. "Medical command, we need immediate psychological evaluation protocols for the entire fleet," the Admiral announced. "The humans have introduced what they call competitive warfare to our soldiers. They've turned space battles into some kind of sporting event, complete with scoreboards, commentary, and what they call victory dances." "Is this some form of mockery?" Veltar asked. "We don't think so. They appear to be genuinely having fun while shooting at us. More disturbing, they've started teaching our pilots their tricks and giving them positive reinforcement when they perform well. Yesterday, one of their commanders sent a handwritten note congratulating Sub-Commander Vorth on his excellent barrel roll technique and suggesting he try something called a loop-de-loop. The Admiral paused, looking directly into the camera with an expression of complete confusion. "Medical command, I need you to tell me. Is it possible for an entire species to be insane but in a helpful way?" Veltar didn't have an answer. In all his years of medicine, he had never encountered a species that weaponized kindness and turned violence into entertainment. The humans seem to operate on completely different psychological principles than the rest of the galaxy. Sir, he finally said, I recommend we request additional xenopsychology specialists. And perhaps we should consider the possibility that humans aren't trying to defeat us in any traditional sense. Then what are they trying to do? Veltar looked around at the wounded soldiers, many of whom were now asking medical staff about human culture, human food, and human entertainment. Several were requesting to speak with human prisoners so they could learn more about these movies and video games that humans kept mentioning. I believe, Veltar said slowly, that they're trying to make friends with us. And they're using warfare as a form of aggressive social networking. The Admiral's expression went from confused to horrified. You mean they're treating this entire military campaign as a social event? That appears to be the case, sir. There was a long pause before Admiral Krexnoth spoke again. Medical Command, I need you to prepare comprehensive psychological profiles on human behavior. And maybe ask them if they'd be interested in having dinner sometime, for diplomatic purposes only, of course. As the transmission ended, Veltar realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could have predicted. Humans had somehow turned the Kethaval's greatest military campaign into an involuntary cultural exchange program. And the most terrifying part was that it seemed to be working. 6 months into what was supposed to be a quick military campaign, the war between humanity and the Kethaval hegemony had evolved into something no galactic civilization had ever witnessed. In the emergency session chambers of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Kelthera stood before a gathering of the galaxy's most brilliant military minds, all of whom looked completely lost. The situation has escalated beyond our ability to understand, she announced, her tentacles waving frantically as she gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them. Humans have not only adapted to Kethaval technology, but have improved it in ways that violate several laws of physics and all concepts of sanity. General Thoxwar of the Draconian Empire, a species known for their logical approach to warfare, studied the tactical reports with growing confusion. Explain to me again how they turned a terraforming ship into a planet cracker. According to our intelligence, Kelthera replied. They took standard atmospheric processors designed to make planets habitable and reverse the process. But instead of simply destroying the atmosphere, they programmed the machines to create what they call light shows while doing it. The planet's destruction was visible from 3 star systems away and apparently synchronized to something called classical music. They destroyed a planet. Artistically? Asked Counselor Vexthor, his compound eyes reflecting his complete bewilderment. That's not even the strangest part, Kelthera continued. They broadcast the entire event as what they called entertainment, and invited the Kethaval fleet to watch. The commentary included detailed explanations of the engineering involved, and suggestions for how the Kethaval could improve their own planetary bombardment techniques. Strategic analyst Mordith, whose species had been studying warfare for thousands of years, raised a crystalline appendage. What's this report about trained dolphins in space? Ah, yes, Kelthera sighed. Humans have somehow convinced their planet's aquatic mammals to serve as reconnaissance units. They've created artificial atmospheric environments that allow dolphins and whales to operate in space. These creatures apparently have natural sonar abilities that can detect cloaked ships. But why dolphins? General Thoxwar asked. According to intercepted communications, humans believe dolphins are really smart and probably enjoy space travel. They've also mentioned something about dolphins having great personalities and being good at making friends with strangers. The military analysts exchanged glances that conveyed a mixture of respect and terror. Humanity was clearly more advanced than they had initially assumed, but their method suggested a complete disconnect from traditional military thinking. Tell them about the strategic retreats, suggested Counselor Drakthol. A veteran of countless galactic conflicts, Kelthera pulled up another holographic display showing troop movements across multiple star systems. Human military tactics now include what they call strategic retreats that span dozens of light years and appear to be elaborate setups for ambushes. But the ambushes aren't designed to destroy enemy forces. Instead, they're designed to force enemy soldiers into situations where they have to work together with humans to solve problems. What kind of problems? General Thoxwar asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. Last week, They lured an entire Keithval battalion into an asteroid field, and then arranged for both fleets to become trapped by a solar storm. The humans immediately began organizing team-building exercises to help everyone work together to escape. By the time the storm passed, the Keithval soldiers were referring to their human captors as battle buddies and asking for their contact information. Strategic Analyst Mordeth's crystalline form flickered with confusion. This violates every principle of military engagement. Are they trying to win or make friends? We think they're trying to do both, Kelthera admitted. But the most disturbing development is that they've somehow convinced 3 other species to join their cause. The chamber fell silent. The idea of humans recruiting allies during an active war was unprecedented. The Altarian Collective, the Vegan Trade Federation, and the Centauri Mining Guild have all pledged military support to humanity, Kelthera continued. When we asked their representatives why, they all gave the same answer. Humans promise them the most fun they'll ever have. Fun, General Thoxwar repeated slowly. They're treating interstellar warfare as entertainment. It gets worse, Kelthera said, pulling up communication logs. We've intercepted formal complaints from the Keithval hegemony. They're filing grievances against humanity through proper diplomatic channels. The aggressors are complaining about their victims, Councillor Vexthor asked in disbelief. The complaints cite unreasonable escalation, tactics that induce nightmares and violation of the natural order. Yesterday, they submitted a 400-page document detailing what they call psychological torture through excessive friendliness. Kelthera displayed the official Keithval complaint on the main screen. The document was written in formal diplomatic language, but the content was anything but formal. Item 247, she read aloud, states, human soldiers continue to offer emotional support to captured Keithval personnel, including but not limited to listening to personal problems, providing career advice, teaching stress management techniques, and sharing what they call motivational memes. Our soldiers are becoming confused about the nature of captivity. Item 298 reads, humans have established what they call morale improvement operations that somehow convince our soldiers to question their life choices. 3 entire companies have requested transfers to non-combat positions so they can pursue their dreams of becoming artists, teachers, and small business owners. The military analyst sat in stunned silence. In thousands of years of galactic history, no one had ever heard of prisoners of war receiving life coaching from their captors. The final item, Kelthera continued, is perhaps the most disturbing. We formally request that the Galactic Council intervene to stop humans from caring about our soldiers' well-being. This level of emotional investment in enemy welfare is unprecedented and making it impossible for our troops to maintain proper military discipline. General Thoxwar leaned back in his command chair, looking like he had aged several decades in the past hour. So the Keithval are asking us to make humans stop being nice to them? Essentially, yes. And what was humanity's response to these complaints? Kelthera pulled up the human diplomatic response, which was surprisingly brief. We're sorry the Keithval are having such a hard time. Would they like to talk about it? We have snacks and board games that might help everyone feel better. Also, we've prepared a presentation about conflict resolution that we think everyone might enjoy. Strategic Analyst Mordeth flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. They responded to formal military complaints with an offer of snacks and entertainment. They also included what appears to be a care package containing something called stress balls, handwritten notes of encouragement, and recipes for comfort food from various human cultures. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs as military leaders from across the galaxy tried to process what they were hearing. Everything they knew about warfare, diplomacy, and interspecies relations was being challenged by a species that seemed to treat everything as an opportunity for friendship. What do we do now? Councillor Drakthul asked. Kelthara looked around at the assembled representatives, seeing her own bewilderment reflected in dozens of alien faces. I suggest we establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity immediately. And perhaps we should consider the possibility that they're not just changing how we think about warfare, they're changing how we think about everything. Outside the chamber, emergency communications networks buzzed with a single urgent message being transmitted across the galaxy. Update all military training manuals immediately. Traditional concepts of victory and defeat no longer apply when humans are involved. In the margins of one report, a junior analyst had written a note that would soon become famous throughout the galactic intelligence community. Humans have somehow weaponized friendship. We have no defense against this. 1 year into the conflict that had redefined galactic warfare, the Galactic Council took an unprecedented step. For the first time in their history, they were intervening in a war not to stop human aggression, but to beg them to fight more conventionally. The Joint Council Human Diplomatic Station, orbiting the neutral world of Kepler 438b, buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy prepared to meet with humanity's diplomatic, teamed arbitrator Prime Zokes, the ancient tree-like being who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, rustled his leaves anxiously as he reviewed the briefing materials. Beside him, Ambassador Kelthera was experiencing what humans might call a stress-induced headache, though her species didn't technically have heads. "Remind me again why we're here," said Counselor Vexthor, his compound eyes reflecting the dim lighting of the station's conference room. "Because," Kelthera replied wearily, "the Kethval hegemony has formally surrendered, but they're refusing to leave the battlefield until humans agree to establish reasonable warfare guidelines." The irony was not lost on anyone present. The galaxy's most feared military force had, essentially, declared themselves too confused to retreat from a war they were losing to an enemy that kept trying to help them with their personal problems. The conference room doors slid open with a soft hiss, and the human diplomatic team entered. Leading them was Ambassador Sarah Chen, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She was followed by Admiral Rodriguez, the same man who had initially told the Kethval they had picked the wrong species to threaten, and Dr. Jackson, a xenopsychologist who looked far too cheerful for someone attending a military conference. "Good morning, everyone," Ambassador Chen said brightly, carrying what appeared to be a large basket. "We brought coffee and pastries. We weren't sure what everyone's dietary requirements were, so we prepared options for methane breathers, photosynthetic species, and energy-based life forms." Arbitrator Zokes swayed slightly, his leaves picking up the electromagnetic signature of what humans called caffeine, with something approaching reverence. "That's very thoughtful. We also brought presentation materials," Dr. Jackson added, setting up what appeared to be a colorful chart covered in smiley faces and rainbow stickers. "We've prepared a comprehensive analysis of what we call the Geneva Suggestions, our interpretation of galactic warfare regulations." Counselor Vexthor clicked his mandibles nervously. "The Geneva Suggestions? Well," Admiral Rodriguez explained, accepting a cup of coffee from Dr. Jackson, "we read through your Rules of Galactic Warfare document, and honestly, it was pretty boring, so we made some improvements." Ambassador Chen opened a thick binder and began reading. "According to the original Galactic Warfare regulations, psychological operations are limited to reasonable levels of mental stress. We've interpreted this to mean that our soldiers can continue using motivational speaking, life coaching, and friendship therapy as battlefield tactics, as long as we make sure enemy soldiers are emotionally supported throughout the process." "Friendship therapy?" Kelthera asked weakly. "It's very effective," Dr. Jackson said enthusiastically. "We've found that most military conflicts stem from underlying communication issues and unresolved personal trauma. Our combat medics are now trained in both battlefield medicine and relationship counseling." Arbitrator Zokes attempted to process this information. "So your soldiers are therapists?" "Well, they're soldiers first," Admiral Rodriguez clarified. "But we found that helping enemy soldiers work through their issues makes them much more cooperative during combat operations. Plus, it's just nice to be nice." Ambassador Chen flipped to another page in her binder. "We've also established what we call fair fight zones, designated areas where we deliberately handicap ourselves to ensure more balanced combat scenarios." "You handicap yourselves?" Counselor Vexthor asked in disbelief. "It's only sporting," Admiral Rodriguez said. "Last week we fought an entire Kethval battalion using only weapons we made from asteroid mining equipment and local wildlife." "Local wildlife?" "The Dolphins came up with most of the tactics," Dr. Jackson explained. "They're remarkably creative when it comes to psychological warfare. Did you know that dolphin laughter translated into ultrasonic frequencies can cause most humanoid species to experience uncontrollable happiness?" Kelthara made a note to add weaponized dolphin joy to her growing list of incomprehensible human tactics. The important thing, Ambassador Chen continued, is that we won the engagement, and afterward, we hosted a pizza party for both sides. Several Kethaval soldiers asked for the recipe. Moving on, she said, turning to a page covered in colorful diagrams. We've also implemented what we call strategic haunting, a completely legal interpretation of psychological warfare that involves leaving encouraging notes in enemy territory, surprising them with unexpected acts of kindness, and occasionally dressing up as their deceased relatives to give them closure on unfinished emotional business. The galactic representatives stared at the humans in stunned silence. Arbitrator Zokes was the first to find his voice. You dress up as dead people to help enemy soldiers process grief? Only when appropriate, Dr. Jackson assured him. We're very respectful about it. We do extensive research on their family histories and cultural traditions. Most species find it quite healing. Admiral Rodriguez pulled up a holographic display showing recent battlefield footage. We've also established morale improvement operations that involve showing enemy forces human movies about friendship, redemption, and personal growth. The Kethaval particularly enjoyed a film called The Princess Bride and have started incorporating quotes from it into their military communications. What kind of quotes? Kelthara asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer would only confuse her further. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die has become surprisingly popular among Kethval soldiers, Ambassador Chen explained. Though they use it more as a conversation starter than a threat. They've also started saying inconceivable whenever they encounter human tactics they don't understand, which is approximately every 15 minutes. The conference room fell silent as the galactic representatives attempted to process what they were hearing. Finally, Counselor Vexthor spoke up. So, to summarize, you've technically complied with all galactic warfare regulations while simultaneously turning military combat into group therapy, cultural exchange, and entertainment. Pretty much, Admiral Rodriguez confirmed cheerfully. Though we prefer to think of it as aggressive conflict resolution with snacks. Ambassador Chen reached into her basket and pulled out what appeared to be an official document. We've also prepared a formal response to the Kethval surrender request. We accept their surrender, but we've invited them to stay and participate in what we're calling post-conflict recovery and friendship-building activities. What kinds of activities? Arbitrator Zokes asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. Well, Dr. Jackson said, consulting his colorful chart, we've planned a series of workshops on emotional intelligence, creative problem-solving, and small business entrepreneurship. We've also organized a galaxy-wide talent show and a potluck dinner where everyone can share their cultural specialties. The Kethval have already signed up for the talent show, Admiral Rodriguez added. Apparently they've formed a barbershop quartet and want to perform something called My Way by a human musician named Frank Sinatra. Kelthara felt her tentacles go limp. The most feared military force in the galaxy is forming a singing group. They're actually quite good, Ambassador Chen said proudly. Their bass singer has an incredible range. We've also helped them start a support group for soldiers dealing with the transition from military to civilian life. 3 former Kethaval commanders are now opening a restaurant together. As the meeting continued, it became clear that humanity had not simply won a war. They had accidentally created a galaxy-wide rehabilitation program that was somehow more effective than centuries of traditional diplomacy. The final item on the agenda was a simple question from Arbitrator Zokes. What do you want from us? Ambassador Chen smiled, the same warm expression she had worn since entering the room. Honestly, we just want to be friends. Universe is a big, scary place, and it's much nicer when everyone gets along. Outside the conference room, emergency communications networks carried a message that would soon reach every corner of the galaxy. Update all diplomatic protocols immediately. Humans have apparently weaponized kindness, and we have no choice but to surrender to their friendship. 6 months after the Kethaval surrender, the Galactic Council faced what historians would later call the Great Confusion, a galaxy-wide crisis of understanding that had nothing to do with military threats and everything to do with the complete success of human rehabilitation programs. In the pristine chambers of the Council headquarters, Ambassador Kelthara stood before an emergency assembly, holding a stack of reports that defied all logical explanation. Around her, representatives from 47 species sat in various states of bewilderment, each trying to process information that challenged their fundamental understanding of conflict resolution. "Honored council members," Kelthera began, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and exhaustion, "I'm pleased to report that the post-war situation with humanity has exceeded all expectations. However, we now face an entirely new set of challenges that our diplomatic protocols never anticipated." Arbitrator Prime Zokes rustled his ancient leaves slowly. "Please explain the nature of these challenges, Ambassador." "The human rehabilitation programs are too successful," Kelthera announced. "The former Kethaval territories are not only peaceful, but have become the most requested vacation destinations in the galaxy. We're receiving tourism applications from species who don't technically qualify for interplanetary travel, but want to see what humans do next." Counselor Vexthor's compound eyes reflected his confusion. "Tourism applications from the former war zone. According to these reports," Kelthara said, consulting her notes, "humans have converted abandoned Kethval military installations into what they call healing retreat centers. They offer programs in stress management, creative expression, and something called Finding Your Passion. The waiting list for admission currently extends to next year." Dr. Mordeth, the council's senior xenopsychologist, raised a crystalline appendage. "What about the Kethval soldiers themselves? Are they adapting to civilian life?" Kelthera pulled up a holographic display showing former military personnel engaged in various peaceful activities. "That's where things become truly incomprehensible. Not only are they adapting, but they're thriving. Former Fleet Commander Grathek has opened a small cafe specializing in human comfort food. His establishment, called The Friendly Fire, serves something called stress relief soup, and has a 5-star rating across 12 star systems." "A cafe?" Counselor Drachthel asked weakly. "The menu includes dishes from 17 different species' culinary traditions, and Grathek personally greets every customer with what he calls aggressive hospitality. He's also started a book club that meets every Tuesday to discuss human literature and emotional growth." The chamber fell silent as representatives tried to process the image of the galaxy's former most feared military commander discussing feelings over soup. "There's more," Kelthera continued. "Sub-Commander Bektar, who previously suffered from what humans call combat stress, has become a certified therapy animal trainer. He specializes in helping former soldiers adopt rescue pets and has written a best-selling book called From War Claws to Paws, A Journey of Healing." "He wrote a book?" Physician Prime Veltar asked, his healing tendrils glowing with fascination. "The book includes forewords by 3 human generals and a dolphin named Charlie, who apparently provided emotional support during the writing process. It's currently being translated into 47 languages and has been requested by universities across the galaxy as required reading for conflict resolution courses." Strategic Analyst. Mordeth flickered rapidly, indicating extreme agitation. "What about the military applications? Surely other species are studying human tactics for strategic purposes." Kelthera's tentacles drooped with what humans might recognize as embarrassment. That's where we encounter our most significant problem. 3 additional species have formally requested that humans please invade them next. They want to be invaded?" General Thoxwar of the Draconian Empire asked in disbelief. "The Altarian Collective, the Vegan Trade Federation, and the Centauri Mining Guild have all submitted official requests for what they call the full human treatment. They want their territories occupied, their military forces defeated, and their soldiers enrolled in human rehabilitation programs." "Why?" Arbitrator Zokes asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would only add to his confusion. "According to their applications," Kelthera read from her reports, "they believe that losing a war to humans would be the most efficient path to personal growth and societal improvement currently available in the galaxy." The Altarian representative specifically mentioned wanting to experience the therapeutic benefits of strategic defeat followed by aggressive friendship. Dr. Mordeth's crystalline form began flickering so rapidly that he appeared to be having what humans might call a nervous breakdown. "They want to be conquered for mental health reasons?" The applications include detailed mental health assessments of their entire populations and requests for specific human programs. The Centauri Mining Guild has asked for the Dolphin Therapy Package and access to human movie nights featuring films about personal redemption. Counselor Vex Thor clicked his mandibles nervously. What has been humanity's response to these requests? They've agreed to provide consultation services and cultural exchange programs, but they've declined to actually invade anyone. Instead, they've offered to send what they call friendship ambassadors to help other species develop their own healing and growth programs. Kelthera displayed a communication from Ambassador Chen that had arrived that morning. We're flattered by the invasion requests, but we think everyone would benefit more from learning to help each other without the whole military conflict part. We've prepared a comprehensive guide called DIY Emotional Growth, a species-by-species approach to healing without warfare, and we're happy to share it with anyone who's interested. They declined to conquer people because they think those people can do better on their own. General Thoxwar asked, his logical military mind struggling to process this information. The guide includes chapters on building supportive communities, conflict resolution through snack sharing, and the therapeutic benefits of group singing. It's already been downloaded by 3 million individuals across 47 systems. Arbitrator Zokes swayed gently, his ancient wisdom failing to provide any context for what he was hearing. Ambassador Kelthera, what do you recommend we do about this situation? Kelthera looked around at her fellow representatives, seeing her own bewilderment reflected in dozens of alien faces. Honored Council, I believe we have no choice but to formally recognize that humanity has fundamentally changed the nature of interspecies relations. They've somehow turned warfare into group therapy, conquest into cultural exchange, and military victory into universal mental health improvement. Are you suggesting we integrate human methods into official council protocols? Councillor Drakthul asked. I'm suggesting, Kelthara said slowly, that we acknowledge that humans have solved problems we didn't even know we had. Crime rates in former conflict zones are at historic lows. Interspecies cooperation is at an all-time high, and mental health support programs are being requested by species who previously didn't even acknowledge the concept of emotional well-being. She pulled up the final report, which showed statistics that would have been impossible to believe 6 months earlier. Galaxy-wide applications for the new Galactic Peacekeeping Force, led jointly by humans and reformed Kethaval veterans, are at 340% capacity. This includes applications from species that don't technically qualify for military service but, and I quote, really want to see what humans do next. The peacekeeping force is oversubscribed? Dr. Mordeth asked, his crystalline form stabilizing slightly. Applications include a detailed essay section where candidates explain their motivation for joining. The most common responses are, I want to learn how to help people. I think humans know something about friendship that we don't, and I heard there might be snacks. The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of what humanity had accomplished began to sink in. They had taken the galaxy's most intractable problem, interspecies conflict, and solved it by treating warfare as an opportunity for emotional growth and social connection. There's one final item, Kelthara announced, though her voice now carried a note of something approaching joy. Humanity has submitted a formal proposal for a new galactic holiday called Universal Friendship Day. They've suggested that all species spend 1 day each year focused on reaching out to neighbors, sharing food, and talking about their feelings. And the proposed activities for this holiday? Arbitrator Zokes asked. Community potluck dinners, group singing, competitive compassion contests, and what they call aggressive appreciation workshops, where participants practice giving each other emotional support. As the session concluded, Kelthara reflected on the galaxy-wide transformation that had occurred in just 18 months. Humans had somehow taken a universe full of isolated, competitive species and turned them into an extended family that occasionally disagreed, but always made up over dinner. Her final report would read, Humanity has successfully weaponized caring about others.